in some more structure. So let's look at the eye. So you see we've got our big edge loop in here that's defining orbicularis oculi. Now we want to start to refine the detail in here. So we have to start adding some edge loops. We're going to add 6 edge loops in total, not all at once, but we're going to put some edge loops in to start getting the data. So we're going to use a new tool that will allow us to grab these points. If I go into low res mode, so if it'll allow us to grab these points and stick them to the eyeball just temporarily. But it'll allow us to make a nice tight seal around the eye, and which is what we want in this case. So to do that, you have to select the eye, and you have to, if you look up here at the top of the screen, there's a little horseshoe magnet, and you click on that, the eye will turn green. That means it's been made live. So anytime now when you move a point on another object, it's going to pop and stick to that. So we want to make sure we're doing this modeling from the front. I'm going to wireframe mode, and I'm just going to select the points on the edge of the eye here, and you won't be able to tell from the front view, but when I select it, it's got a little round circle around the center of the manipulator, and that means that it's going to snap to something. So when I just grab the circle and move a little bit, and you can't tell from the front view, but it does pop onto the eye. So you can see here that it's actually popped onto the eye. Right. So now these are on the eyeball. Take this one here and work in this detail. And I go here. Now I'm just not going to go right into the corner of the eye, just kind of the edge of the eye here, or like the drawing of my eye anyway, where it turns away from the view. Grab this one. You have to check and make sure these all actually stuck. Sometimes they don't. I'm going to pull these into where the edge of the semilunar membrane is. So I'm not going into the canthus, we'll work that out later. But just the edge of the eye where it meets the semilunar membrane. So let's look at this. So yeah, they all seem to pop in. You can see we're starting to build in the structure of the eye there. Now we need one more edge loop to actually get the corner of the eye, so let's go to object mode and go to edit mesh, insert edge loop, and we're just going to put one in here so we can get a line for the corner of the eye. Got a nice flow of the geometry, so we get an edge loop all the way along the head, and go to object mode again. Yep, that looks good. Now turn off, we don't want this one to snap to the eyeball. So just click on the magnet again and the eye will go back to normal. And let's select this. Oh, come on. Oops. Don't do that when you have anything selected. Just hit the magnet with nothing selected and that will make the eyeball not live anymore. If you click that while you have the face selected, then that will make the face live, which is not what we want. So let's just select this vertex and move it into the corner of the eye here. Move that back in a bit. Okay. So that's pretty good. Now I'm just going to make sure, you want to make sure things are flowing out of the eye onto the nose nicely. That looks pretty good. Everything is flowing out here. Okay, so now let's add another edge loop, and we're going to sort of help define the shape of the orbit, the margin of the orbit. So go into object mode, and oops, sorry. The easy way to access these commands is to hold down the space bar, and I can find these here. Insert edge loop. So I want to put one in here. Look at it in the front view. I may want to see my skull here in shaded mode in wireframe. So you can see my person is a fairly oblong sort of shaped orbit, so I'm going to kind of work that shape in a little bit by grabbing the vertices of this new edge loop that I created and sort of working this shape in. Now we're going to have another edge loop in the middle here later that's going to make that crease where the eyelid recedes back into the orbit, so don't try and work that in yet. Maybe pull this in a little bit. You don't have to match the orbit exactly, but just get the feeling of it in in the geometry. Oh, come on. Whenever you have these big heavy meshes like the scan of the skull or the mandible on the screen, you'll find that performance goes down. Oh, I'm going to move this up and over. So I'm also modifying. So this will be the sort of orientation of the corrugator muscle here. So I want to work that in. Work these in a little bit. Okay, so that's pretty good. A little more detail in the eye there. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is actually to work in the edge of the eyelids so we can shape them a little bit. So we want to create a new edge loop in here and then pull it out to shape the eyelid. So object mode, hit Y because that was my last tool. Now I'm going to pull these out and forward, down or up, and to make that flat plane of the red part of the eyelid. Now I have to really kind of exaggerate it because if we go into the shade or the smooth mode, you'll see that unless you really exaggerate it, you won't see that plane very well at all. So I'm just going to go in and kind of move these around. I might do some of this in the perspective view, just relying on my handles here. Trying to work in the shape as the way the eyelids go up and over and then back. We're leaving some room because we're going to put the canthus and the caruncle in here later. And you can see how that shape is already forming. Oops, I think that was too far. So you can see how the shape of the eyelid is getting worked in. So if you go into 3 mode, see when it's smoothed, there's not much of an edge there, so you even have to exaggerate it a little bit more. Now we're going to add more detail in later that will help define this sharp edge of the eyelid, but try and get it as fairly close as we can to start. Remember, the medial canthus is generally lower than the lateral canthus, but of course it depends on what the skull is telling you. Let's look at it from the front. So that's looking pretty good. Let's look at it from the side to make sure everything's flowing out of the eye well here. Now this looks like this eyelid is a little too high. Looks like I selected. Oh, that's good. I'm just going to move that down a little bit. We want to select these points. You see how we're nicely building in the structure slowly. Oh, don't want to make it look too mean. That's a little too high. If I look in one mode, you can see how much I'm exaggerating it to get the shape here. This looks pretty good. Everything seems to be flowing out. the way we want it. Oops, yeah, turn off tissue depth markers on the cranium. Might move these down a little bit. Now we're still going to add some more geometry to define the medial canthus, but I want to make sure we've got a nice space in there for it. Everything's flowing out of the eye well, because we want to have a nice divot in here too. So that looks pretty good.